Good evening, boys and girls. Today's lesson is lesson 6.3, Simplest Form. Our essential question for today is, how can you write a fraction as an equivalent fraction in simplest form? How can you write a fraction as an equivalent fraction in simplest form? Please write this down in your study notes. Let's take a look at our first example. Brianna bought an ice cream cake cut into 6 equal pieces. Brianna, Stephanie, and Lily each took 2 pieces of the cake home. Brianna said she and her 2 friends each took 1/3 of the cake home. Is Brianna correct? A good strategy that you can do is you can draw a model and see if she's right. You can draw a circle and cut it into 6. Now the easiest way for me to draw a model cut into 6 is I like to make one vertical line straight down my circle and then just make a crisscross through the middle. There you have 6 slices. Now I labeled each slice the first letter of each of the girls' name. I put 2 B's in for Brianna, so I'm going to shade these 2 B's the color blue for Brianna. This just symbolizes that those are her 2 pieces. I'm going to make Stephanie's pink, and then I'm going to shade in Lily's yellow. Now, let's see what the question asks again now that we can see our model. It says, Brianna said she and her 2 friends each took 1/3 of the cake home. Is Brianna correct? Now, if you look at this model, I see 3 different colors. Remember that with fractions, the denominator means how many equal parts are there. So I'm going to put down 3 because I see 3 different colors. Now I see that Brianna has 1 part of those 3 colors. Now remember, when we started out, she had 2 out of the 6 parts. She still does, but we can also say that she has 1/3 because 2 6 equals 1/3. They are equivalent fractions, but 1/3 is a simplified fraction. So remember the title of our lesson called Simplest Form? Well, that's what we're learning about today. A fraction is in simplest form when you can represent it using as few equal parts of a whole as possible. Just like on that last slide, we had the girls represented as 3 equal parts. That's fewer than 6. You know it's in simplest form if you can have equal parts and it's as few as possible. But how can you do that? I'm going to show you how. So just to review, a fraction is in simplest form when 1 is the only factor that the numerator and denominator have in common. The parts of the whole cannot be combined into fewer equal-sized parts to show the same fraction. So if 1 is the only common factor between your numerator and denominator, your fraction is simplified. So the way we do that is we have to divide our numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. For example, let's look at 6/10. All right, what I'm going to do is I want to list my factors of 6. I have 1, 6, 2, and 3. My factors of 10 are 1, 10, 2, and 5. What is the greatest common factor that they share? I know they both share 1, but that's not the greatest. They both share 2. Now let's look at our rule again. We need to divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. I see 2 as the greatest number there. So that means that I can divide 6/10, my numerator by 2, my denominator by 2. Remember, 2 halves equals 1 whole. So we're really dividing it by 1, but it's represented as 2 halves. So 6/10, the numerator and denominator will both be divided by 2. I will have 3/5. How did I get 3/5? Because 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Therefore, 3/5 is equivalent to 6/10, and it's also in simplest form. Because the only factors that 3 and 5 share is 1. And when there are factors that they share is 1, it's done. So we can say that 3/5 is the simplest form of 6/10. So how do you simplify a fraction? You divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. So now let's take a look at 8/10. Let's write this in simplest form. Now I know it's not simplified yet, because I know that I can put 8/10 into fewer equal parts. So remember our steps. We want to find the common factors of 8 and 10, and then we want to divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. So I'm going to list my factors of 8. My factors of 8 are 1 and 8, 2 times 4. And my factors of 10 are 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. Now I know 1 is not the greatest. I know they have 2 as a common factor. 4 is not common at all. Neither is 5, neither is 8, neither is 10. Therefore, the greatest common factor that they both share is 2. So I'm going to divide my numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor, which is 2, which remember equals 1 whole, and any number divided by 1 always equals itself. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now here's a little trick to know that it's in simplest form. If ever the numerator and denominator are one number away from each other, we call that they're consecutive numbers. It's already simplified. So 4/5 is simplified. And just to prove this with a model, do you see how this model shows 4/5? I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 parts out of 5 shaded in, but it also equals 8/10. So 8/10 is equivalent to 4/5, but in simplest form, it's 4/5. They're equivalent fractions. Okay, so let's write this fraction in simplest form. Remember the trick. You have to divide the numerator and the denominator by the greatest common factors. So if you want to pause this video right now and try it before I show you, go ahead and do that to see if you can do it all by yourself. Okay, so what you should have done was you should have listed your factors of 6. My factors of 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3. And my factors of 12 are 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Now, let's just find our greatest common factors. Now, I know that 2 is not the greatest. They both have 3 in common, but they also both have 6 in common. Therefore, the greatest common factor is 6. So remember what we do. We divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. 6 equals 1 whole, so we're dividing 6/12 by 1, by the greatest common factor though, and it will equal 1/2, because 6 divided by 6 is 1, 12 divided by 6 is 2. And I know 1/2 is in simplest form because remember what I said at the beginning of the lesson? You want to have as few as equal parts as possible. And I can see that I have 2 equal parts and 1 part is shaded in, and this shows 1/2. Now I could actually turn this 1/2 into 12 parts and 6 will be shaded in. Do you see right there that I have 6 parts out of 12 parts shaded in? But also if you look at the picture, 1/2 is shaded in because 6/12 is equivalent to 1/2, but it's in simplest form, or as few as equal parts as possible, will be 1/2. Okay, so let's put 2/10 in simplest form. Do you want to pause the video and try to write it in simplest form before I show you? Go ahead and do that. If not, just pay attention. Okay, if you just unpaused your video, you should have written down that my factors for 2 are 1 and 2. My factors for 10 are 1, 10, 2, and 5. Obviously, right there I can see the greatest common factors that 2 and 10 share is 2. So my rule is divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. So I'm going to divide 2/10 by 2/2, which equals 1 whole. And that'll equal 1/5. How did I get 1/5? Because 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 2/10 is equivalent to 1/5. Do you see in this model right here shows 1/5? That's as few of equal parts as possible. However, I can magically turn it into 2/10. Do you see 2 out of 10 parts are shaded in? But before, I just had 1 part out of 5 shaded in. That's because 2/10 is equivalent to 1/5. They're equivalent fractions, but 1/5 is in simplest form. Here's another trick I want to tell you about. To know a fraction is in simplest form, if ever you see that the numerator is 1, it's automatically in simplest form. So the two tricks are, if your numerator is 1, then you're done. Or if your fraction is consecutive, where they're one number away from each other, 3 is one number away from 4, then this one as well, or this one is simplified also. So I can see right here that 1/5 is simplified because my numerator is 1, so it's done. So let's look at this example. It says, tell whether the fractions are equivalent. Write equal or not equal. Use simplest form to help. In other words, let's simplify 3/6 and then let's simplify 5/10, and let's see if they're equal fractions. So I'm going to start off by simplifying 3/6. I know my factors for 3 are 1 and 3. My factors for 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3. So my greatest common factor for 3/6 would be 3. So I'm going to divide my numerator and denominator both by 3, and I get 1/2, because 6 divided by 3 is 2 and 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I can say 3/6 equals 1/2. Now let's simplify 5/10. And I'm going to show you that I can find my factors of 5. I have 1 and 5, that's it because it's prime. And my 10 is going to be 1, 10, 2, and 5. My greatest common factor that they both share is 5. So I'm going to divide 5/10 by 5/5, which is equal to 1 whole. And that also equals 1/2. So 3/6 equals 1/2, and 5/10 equals 1/2. Therefore, 3/6 is equal to 5/10. Now, a quick trick, just to let you know, and this is just something I've learned over the years, that if ever your numerator is half of the denominator, 3 is half of 6, you can simplify it to equal 1/2, because 3 is half of 6. That just is a little trick you're going to pick up over these lessons. 5/10 also equals 1/2, because isn't 5 half of 10? It sure is. So right away I could have looked at this and said, well, I know this is simplified to 1/2 because 3 is half of 6. And I know 5/10 can be simplified to 1/2 because 5 is half of 10. Therefore, 3/6 is equal to 5/10. They're equivalent. So I want you to try to do this one on your own by pausing the video and then check along with me. Remember, you want to use simplest form to help. So simplify 9/12 and then simplify 1/3. And then I want you to tell me if they're equivalent. Okay, for this one you should have simplified 9/12 by listing your factors of 9. My factors of 9 are 1, 3, and 9. My factors of 12 are 1, 12, 2, and 6, 3, and 4. So my factor that I can divide by is 3 because that's the greatest common factor. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 9/12 equals 3/4. Now I'm going to look at 1/3. Do you guys see that on 1/3, what does that remind you of? Remember that little trick I told you? If 1 is the numerator, it's done because you can't find any other smaller factor than 1 for the factors of 1 because its only factor is 1. Therefore, it's done. So 9/12 really equals 3/4, and this equals 1/3. Are those equal fractions when they're simplified? No, they're not. So I would say 9/12 is not equal to 1/3. So here are your homework questions. Question number 1 says, 8 of 12 students had hot lunch. In simplest form, what fraction of the students bought hot lunch? Remember, 8 out of 12 looks like this is a fraction, 8/12. So look at your choices. Which one of those choices shows 8/12 in simplest form? Which fraction of those students bought hot lunch? Now let's look at question number 2. Is this fraction in simplest form? Yes or no? You need to tell me why you know that. And then when you're finished, I want you to assess yourself. 1. Are you a novice? If you don't understand this, please rewatch this video for better understanding. Level 2, apprentice. You're starting to get it. You still need coaching. If you're apprentice, I also want you to rewatch this video. Number 3, practitioner. You can do this by yourself, but sometimes you might get stuck. And level 4, expert. You really understand this well, and you could teach it to someone. So tomorrow we will practice simplest form in class, doing lots of activities, and I can't wait to talk to you tomorrow about it, and we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm even going to teach you my simplifying fraction song, so be ready. Bye-bye.